So what we're doing in this session is something called Qigong. And Qigong is a particular style of Qigong. I think it's probably worth saying that I'm not a fan of physical accuracy. I don't think it's necessarily useful to worry about doing the form correctly. Hi, Agnes, by the way. What I'm interested in is the body and mind working together. So if, for example, we're in a movement that is, I'm going to move away from the camera a little bit here. So if we're in a movement that is, for example, this, where we're pushing out and gathering back, this is more of an idea than a movement. So whereas it's tempting to try to do exactly as I'm doing, it could be that doing this is difficult. Maybe it's just a difficult movement for you. Maybe it's difficult to sustain the movement for any length of time. But the idea here is expand out into blue sky and draw blue sky back in. So you can have a very similar idea with a far smaller movement. So maybe it's here. You know, even if it's just this, it doesn't matter. What we're interested in is getting the body and mind working together. I always try to make sure that all the movement that I use is symmetrical as well. Within Qigong, most of the movement is right and left moving together. But talking and working with people who have a Parkinson's diagnosis, one of the things that I've been told is very helpful is if you have a weaker side, by using symmetrical movement, the weaker side tends to have more movement than the stronger side, than it would do if you were working them in isolation. So working symmetrically is quite a strong intention for these sessions. There's a number of things that sit within it about the mindset that we have, and we can sort of pull those ones around a bit later on. Within the Qigong system, when they're doing work specifically into Parkinson's diagnosed people, there tends to be a big emphasis on the spine and working with the spinal column. And I think it's a very useful place to go to. But I'm also very interested in releasing the shoulders, softening the shoulders, working with the hips, basically getting the whole of the body working. So the first section that we do, which is about a 20-minute session, is focused on to getting the whole body working, seeing where it's at today. So for those of you who've been to my sessions regularly, especially if you turn up on the morning session, and you'll see that sometimes I'll use a forward bend and I can barely get my hands down as far as my knees. Some days I can get my hands all the way down to the floor. Actually, they're not good days or bad days, they're just different. There's a story I can tell you on this. We were on retreat about 4 or 5 years ago. We run retreats up in Scotland, and there was this lady had come over from Greece, Lamprini. And Lamprini was one of these people who was just effortlessly elegant and beautiful in everything that she did. And we're doing the morning practice, and the morning practice we had for this particular retreat was wall squats. So wall squats, you stand with your toes against the wall and your nose against the wall, and without holding on, you go from full standing down to full squatting and back up again. I can't do this. I struggle with wall squats. So there I was this particular day. My normal spot where I'd hidden in the corner was completely taken. So I had to stand next to Lamprini, and at the corner of my eye, I can see Lamprini effortlessly up and down the wall. I was just thinking, oh, this is horrible. I'm going to be doing this for an hour. And in any case, about 2 months later, I was in a session and Lamprini was there. And we ended up sitting at the same lunch table. And I said to her, I hated doing wall squats next year. She said, wall squats are boring. What? And she said, yeah, they're just a bit dull. And suddenly I got it, that actually I got more out of doing things like wall squats because they were challenging to me. If the practice is simple, if the practice is easy, it doesn't push you at all. So what I'm suggesting is that when we're doing these sessions, see where you are with stuff and be willing to push yourself a little bit. See how things work. And don't worry about getting it right. Just be willing to push a little bit and see where you go to. So, having thrown all of that stuff at you and said that I wasn't going to talk and we're going to get on with it, are there any questions before we kick off? Okay. So, just for this piece here, I'm going to put it into a slightly different view, and I'm going to mute everybody for the first set, and then I will unmute you when we come out of this session. This is probably about 20 minutes of coming into movement. So please join in as best you can and enjoy. Oh, change the camera as well. There we go. So, starting with a comfortable stance. And what I mean by a comfortable stance is a stance that enables the breath to flow freely. So if, for example, you tense your fists, you'll probably find that it restricts the breath. So let go of the fists. If the legs are knees drawn back, locked knees, you'll probably find it restricts the breath. If it does, release the knees. Find the stance that enables your breath to work well for you today. And when I talk about the breath, within Qigong, we tend to breathe down into the abdomen. And we talk about breathing into the kidneys. So I sometimes do this where you put the hands on the small of the back. It doesn't matter if it's the palms or the back of the hands or just one hand. But just notice that part of the body. And as you breathe, notice that part of the body responding. Once you've taken a few breaths there, you'll probably find that that part of the body warms up a little bit. So if you now have a warm patch on your back, you can take the hand away and just breathe into the warm patch on the back. It's worth taking a few moments here because these are the little bits of practice that you can do anywhere. So at any time, you can take that moment to just stand and allow the breath to flow freely. You can also start to mobilize the body, so creating a bit of space in the neck. So this isn't a specific movement, it's just creating space in the vertebra. Noticing what works for you today. Opening the neck. Okay, we can now shift the awareness from the neck down into the mid-spine. And to work the mid-spine, I like to draw the shoulder blades together. And then open the shoulder blades apart. Squeeze together. Open out. A couple more times. Squeeze together. Open out. One more. Squeeze the shoulder blades together. Release them out. And then we can start to rotate the shoulders. So rolling the shoulders also moves the shoulder blades, but now not only the mid-spine, but also the shoulders are releasing. Then from the shoulders, we can open out into the elbows. We can release the elbows. We can release the wrists, the hands, and the fingers. So an idea of opening up space out to the ends of the fingertips, however that works for you. Maybe give them a little shake. And then we can gently turn one side to the other. So keeping the hips fairly stationary, fairly steady. We're turning the lower spine, we're turning the lumbar spine. And again, all we're doing is creating space. So as you turn, if you can let the arms move freely, that's great. And if the hands can come and just sort of slap the back gently as they come round, that's also very good. A few more times, mobilizing the lumbar spine. And then this is one of those movements that we don't just stop it, we allow it to subside, so reduce it down. Come back into a centered posture. Take a moment to check in, notice the breath. So then we need to do some work to open the legs. So here, I quite like putting the hands on the hips, but you can put them on the lowest rib and rotate the hips. So it's like turning the tailbone round in a circle. Putting the hands on the hips means that you can just feel the movement that's happening in the hips. You can feel how much space you've actually got, how much mobility you've got there. And then if you relax the hands and allow the movement just to sort of soften out across the body, and start to notice the weight shifting around the bottom of the feet. Bottom of the feet relaxing and softening. And as the feet relax, Yongchuan, bubbling spring, balls of the feet, opens. And to help this idea, we raise the hands up, and then on the out breath, we can imagine pushing down into the earth. And on the in breath, gathering up into the abdomen, into lower dantian. Expanding out on the out breath, gathering in on the in breath. And allowing that connection to be very, very easy. Connecting down into Hunyuan Qi and Hunyuan Qi connecting up into lower dantian. The legs relax. It creates a very strong foundation for practice. We can allow the legs to relax, the ankles, the knees and the hips to be open. And the body becomes more centered and more relaxed. And then the next time the hands draw up in front of lower dantian, in front of the abdomen, allow them to pause. And then imagine lifting up, connecting up into blue sky above you. And drawing blue sky down into lower dantian, into the abdomen. So this may coordinate with the breath, it may not, it doesn't matter. It's an idea of connecting up, the spine opening up, and then drawing blue sky back down through all that space you've created. Keep going, expanding up and gathering down. Allowing the body to relax. Allowing the physical to quieten down. One more time, expanding up and gathering down. And the hands pausing in front of lower dantian. And this time we'll open the elbows, we'll open the wrists, we'll open the arms, and expand out to the sides. We're expanding out in all directions, creating space and drawing blue sky back inside. Relaxing out. And gathering back. A couple more times. Expanding out, relaxing out. And gathering back. Once more. Out. And back. And just pausing with the hands in front of lower dantian. Just take a second to be here. Okay, so here we also notice the space inside. So we can notice the breath, we can notice the space between thoughts. But then we can allow the awareness to expand out slightly, so it expands into the space that we're standing in. Expanding out, just noticing the space immediately around you. And we can expand out again, and we can notice these people that we're sharing the practice with. Everybody connected. Everybody supported. And once more, the awareness expands out further, out into blue sky. Everything supported, everything connected. And then draw the mind back inside. So this is the process that we go through to start practice. And the practice itself will start just by turning the thumbs forwards and allow the front of the body to open. Turn the thumbs back, open the shoulder blades, bow the body down ever so slightly. So open the front and open the back as the thumbs turn back. And gradually making this movement bigger and bigger. Thumbs turn back, open the back. Thumbs turn front, open the front. Hands rising up a little bit more each time when the thumbs open at the front. Body bows down a little more and the thumbs turn back. And what you tend to find is that the movement starts to coordinate with the breath. So the rising up and the opening of the arms naturally opens the lungs. Drawing the arms together, bowing down, squeezes the lungs. So you can bring focus to the breath for a few of these. Relaxing the breath, allowing it to flow freely. And then we can make the movement bigger still. And we can shift the awareness away from the breath into two channels, red mind and blue mind. Two central channels. So when the hands rise up, we're opening the whole of the front of the body. When the body bows down, we're opening the whole of the spine, the whole of the back channel. So moving between these two. Opening the whole of the front and the whole of the back. few more times. So this movement also massage all of the internal organs, move every part of the body. It's a great movement to just spend a little bit of time. But the next time the hands get to the top, allow them to pause at the top. And here the body can still move, so it's just moving freely back and forth. And then we can draw Qi down. So draw the hands down. And as the hands come down, notice the neck as the hands come down past the neck. All of the vertebrae open, comfortable. Down through the mid-spine. All of the vertebrae healthy and bright. The lumbar, down to the tip of the tailbone. Then bring the awareness up into the hips. Hands go down the legs, noticing the knees. Noticing the ankles, all the bones in the feet, and at the bottom, gather Qi and lift Qi. Draw Qi down. The whole of the spine, from the top of the neck, each vertebra, bright and healthy. All the way down through the lumbar spine to the tip of the tailbone, up to the hips, down through the legs. Doesn't matter if you can't bend down all the way, it's just an idea. Noticing the knees, the ankles, and the feet. And lift Qi up. And again, draw Qi down through all of the bones, but here we also notice the marrow. The idea of the marrow being bright and healthy. In traditional Chinese medicine, the spinal column and the brain are also considered to be marrow. So the whole of the spinal column bright and healthy. To the hips and then down through the big bones of the legs, the marrow bright. One more. Lift Qi up. Draw Qi down through the marrow, bright and healthy. All the way down. The hips and the legs. We'll go all the way back up to the top again. But this time when we draw Qi down, we'll draw Qi down into lower dantian. So draw Qi down only as far as the abdomen, only as far as the belly. And here we're coming to a very simple form of Tai Chi ball. So I'm going to open the stance just a little bit more, but whatever is comfortable for you. And then the simple idea is the hands expand out to the sides, they gather Qi, and they draw Qi back into the abdomen. And as they do, you squat down ever so slightly. As the hands spiral out, you lift the crown, you lift the top of the head, and as the hands draw back, sink the tailbone down, gathering. Expanding out, gathering back. A couple more times. Expand out, and gather back. Okay, we're going to use alternating hands here. So the next time the hands come back, allow them to pause briefly, and then allow the right hand to circle out, and then the left hand. So what I'm interested in here, it isn't the size of the movement, but it's the flow of the movement. Shifting the weight from one leg to the other. A little bit of twisting in the hips, a little bit of turning in the spine. And just an idea of gathering Qi back in all directions. creating space in the whole body. So as the weight moves from side to side, the twisting, the turning, the opening, all of the joints. Keeping it going a little bit longer. And then the next time the hands are in front of lower dantian, allow them to pause. Maybe that's reducing the movement back, gathering in. And then we can allow them to spiral up, spiral out. Doesn't matter how they spiral out. They come back under the armpits. Again, squat down slightly, gather in. So this is rising up through the body. Front of the body opens. As the hands spiral out, squat down slightly. Open the back slightly, gather in. Rising up. Out. And back. Up. Out. And back. And then to draw to a close, up to the top. And reverse the movement. So now draw Qi down through the center of the body, through the center of the head, the center of the chest, into the center of the abdomen. Allow the hands to spiral out to the sides and up. Draw Qi down. Upper dantian, middle dantian, lower dantian. Spiraling out, up. Upper dantian, middle dantian, lower dantian. Then hands spiral up. When they get to the top, just pause for a moment. Draw the feet closer together, as close as feels comfortable. And then we'll gently draw Qi down again. Upper dantian, middle dantian, lower dantian. Spiraling out and up. Draw Qi down. Upper dantian, middle and lower. And then the last time, hands out to the sides and up. Draw Qi down, take your time. Upper dantian, Shenji palace, full of blue sky. Down into middle dantian, Hunyuan palace, everything healthy. Down into lower dantian, Hunyuan palace. Hunyuan palace. She is abundant. To draw the section to a close, relax the hands to the side. They spiral out in front, and they come back. One hand on top of the other, and you make it. The body relaxed and the mind centered. Relax the hands. Ease out. Okay. A little over 20 minutes. So have a quick sort of check-in, see how people are doing. I need to open the door and get a bit more air through here. So, how was that? Oh, everyone's muted at the moment, so let me unmute everybody just so that you can chat. How was that?
Fine, thank you.
Yes. Excellent.
Very helpful.
It felt good.
Mm.
Wonderful. Good to see you.
Interesting, John, that when we do mindfulness yoga on the Tuesday, Charlotte is sort of in tune with you about the way we breathe and not having to get everything dead right, which
Yeah.
I find liberating.
Yeah. Yeah.
She says what she'd like us to do, but we do what we can do.
That's it. I mean, I've trained in quite a few schools, and some of them are very much about you need to do it accurately, you need to do it correctly. And I think that there is a place to do it accurately and correctly. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to find out where you are, how you can work for yourself. And if you spend all the time trying to get it right, you're not really doing the practice, you're just doing choreography.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it needs to be held gently, and you work out how you can work.
Yes.
For me, I think that's why the recordings are important, because I do try to watch so I can see what to do.
Did you get hold of the recordings, Doreen?
Not yet.
Okay. I know that Kobe says that they're up on the website, or you can get hold of them on the website. So I'll chase that one up with him.
It's because I haven't looked, so not because I couldn't find them.
I won't chase him then.
It was you last week who said about flexing your feet. Was it you who said you found flexing your feet helped with feet pain?
Yes. Did it help you?
Yes, I've been doing that, and it was remarkable.
Remarkable.
Honest.
Good.
So painful before.
So it's the same thing. And if I do it before I get out of bed, it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing shiatsu classes as well. So I'm finding that this all ties in very nicely with what I do on a Wednesday morning in shiatsu for an hour.
Uh-huh.
So it's great. I mean, the same sort of similar principles, the bubbling spring, there are lots of similarities. They're called different things, but the dantian is still there, the hara is still there. It's also the terminology is the same. Yeah. So I find Wednesday my very calming, relaxing day, and everything is loosey-goosey at the end of the day. It's great.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that I'm always interested in the commonality between practices. And certainly one of the things that I've found, the work that I've been doing in the mental health field, when you start to strip out some of the frameworks, you find that pretty much every system has huge commonality within it. And yeah, sure, if you want to come and purely study Qigong, we can talk about the accuracy, we can talk about the frameworks, we can sort of explain how everything works together. But I think it's better to hold it a little bit more loosely and find what works for you.
Absolutely, find what works.
Yes.
Otherwise it becomes stressful.
Yeah. But having said that, I'm going to have a little caveat on that one. One of the things that I've found, for me, Qigong has been, I've been studying it for over 20 years, and it's been a journey of self-discovery and healing and all sorts. And I quite often say now it's easier to go on a journey with one bicycle than with two. Sometimes I find that to spend the time in a particular practice or a particular mindset, so you can see how beneficial it is for you, helps you understand a little bit more deeply. If you sort of throw the kitchen sink at stuff, sometimes you'll get great results, but you don't know what creates the great result.
Perhaps it's fundamental to the human being, human nature. So all these different disciplines and from different cultures, it all is distilled down to the same thing, really.
Yeah, and I think you can mix them, but I think you need to keep with a single sort of idea around them that they all work for you.
We were doing mindful, well, I've done it with other things, mindful walking. So, can you take Qigong outside? I mean, presumably what the people you see in the parks in China are doing Tai Chi. But can you take it outside? Or does it never leave you?
Yeah, absolutely. What we'll do next is we'll do the La Chi practice, and you can use the La Chi practice as a walking practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that a lot this week. That's been very helpful, the Lai Chi practice.
Yeah. It's so simple. It's just really
Yes.
accessible, isn't it?
And I do, you know, just when, you know, even if I'm in the kitchen and I'm just sort of waiting for something to boil, like a kettle, I'm doing it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great practice, and let's say it can be adapted in all kinds of ways. The comment about the parks in China, an interesting aside on this one, Qigong was made illegal in China in the 1990s, in the late 1990s. So you weren't allowed to practice Qigong. So when I went out in 2010, it was still illegal. So it was interesting training in that situation. It was made illegal because, okay, basically what happened was there was a center called the Huajia Center, and the Huajia Center was, it's known as the medicineless hospital. So the form of Qigong that I practice is the one that was from the Huajia Center. And they had over 400,000 people go through, and they got amazing healing results from it. But a number of the people who went through were high-ranking government officials. So the government then turned around and said, okay, Qigong is amazing, we're going to make it a cultural treasure, which, no problem. Then they decided to launch a league table. And number one on the league table, unsurprisingly, was the system that I use, Shineng Qigong. And I say unsurprisingly, not because it's the best, but because that's the one that the most government officials had had the great results with. And then the Falun Gong system fell out of the top 10. They weren't there. At which point the leader of the Falun Gong said, this isn't right. And he got his followers to step up and protest about it. And as I understand it, he mobilized about 60,000 people.
Oh, gee.
Now, if we know anything about the way that China was working at that time, they'd already banned religion because of the power that the religious leaders had. Then they suddenly saw that the Qigong leaders had a similar level of power, and so the obvious thing to do was to ban Qigong. Now, what's happened subsequently is that Falun Gong no longer completely aligned themselves with Qigong. So although Falun Gong is still at loggerheads with the Chinese government, the link to Qigong has disappeared off slightly, so now Qigong is legal to practice in China. But in 2013, when I went out, there was a guy there, a lovely teacher who had adopted an English name of Peter. And I was talking to him and I said, so do you practice Qigong now that it's legal? Do you practice Qigong in the parks? And he said, no, no, no. He said, I've only ever practiced Tai Chi. It looks just like Qigong. The mindset is just like Qigong, but I have to call it Tai Chi. And so actually the underlying thing here is that quite a lot of the thing that you see being practiced under the heading of Tai Chi in China is actually Qigong, but they can't call it Qigong because they're nervous about having that label on it.
What's the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong?
You only really see the difference in its purest forms. In the purest form of Tai Chi, and the full name is Tai Chi Chuan, which translates as Grand Ultimate Boxing. In its purest form, it's a very, very advanced martial art. In the purest forms of Qigong, you're talking about spiritual practices, you're talking about the Taoist search for immortality, you're talking about, especially within Tibetan Buddhism, it's used to aid the journey to enlightenment.
Okay.
But the bit in the middle, the bit that we tend to do here around healing and health, if you start as a Qigong person, you consider it all to be Qigong. If you start as a Tai Chi person, you probably consider it all to be Tai Chi.
Yeah.
So we sort of sit in the middle ground here. But at their extremes, they're quite different. But in the space between, they merge quite fluidly.
I'm both at the moment, so.
Yeah, and I imagine that there'll be a lot of similarities in what I do to what you do within the Tai Chi class.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But as I say, I call it Qigong because that's my training.
Well, it sounds like it's almost more of what goes on within rather than what you're doing with outside. It's more of internalizing.
Yeah, to a great extent. I mean, you can talk about differences in the frameworks because we talk about different intentions for the energy within Tai Chi and within Qigong. But it's all quite subtle. And for the casual onlooker, it'll always look very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea that with Qigong somehow, or the feedback that I get is that the Qigong tends to be simple. So you have permission to take a very small piece and just turn that into your complete exercise, your complete practice.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Tai Chi, we tend to talk about sequences of movements.
Okay.
So that's really the only difference that I think is really noticeable. But then there's some Qigong teachers, there's some styles of Qigong. I mean, one of the styles that I teach, it takes an hour to an hour and a half to go through the full set of movements. So that sounds a lot like Tai Chi from the sense that there's sequence that we go through. So yeah.
So if I search Qigong on the internet, I might actually be getting some Tai Chi?
Some of the practitioners of Qigong will be doing stuff that looks like Tai Chi. When we did the gathering Qi here, this is not unlike the Cloud Hands practice. And the Cloud Hands practice just has a different arm position. And the Cloud Hand practice has a different application. So yeah, if you search for Qigong, you may be seeing Tai Chi. If you search for Tai Chi, you may be seeing Qigong.
So I'll just search for the recordings and I'll know what I'm getting.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is so much great stuff out there. I'm sure that if you look for Qigong or Tai Chi relating to Parkinson's, you'll find really relevant content no matter where you go.
Okay, good, good tip. Thank you.
So for the last section, what I'd like to do is I'd like to use the La Chi practice, which is the simple expand out and gather back. I'd like to address Susan's question about walking and using it for walking practice. But I'd like to take this idea again that we can use a very simple practice and we can do something really great for ourselves with a very simple practice. So, shall we come back into practice again? I'm going to try the mic again. I've just switched across to this little chap here. Is the sound okay at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to leave everybody's mics. If anything comes up, you can say something. You can interrupt. But just quickly while we do that, I'm going to just do one more thing here. There we go. So switching across to the other camera. Okay, so in simple terms, La Chi is just expand out and gather back. Quite a nice way to play with La Chi is to make it big. So if we look at the big La Chi, it's an idea of when we expand the hands out. Here, it's almost like the practice we just did. It's the idea of we're expanding out into blue sky in all directions. We're becoming huge. And then when we gather back, we gather all the way in and we sort of squat down slightly. I quite like drawing the feet together. It's almost like a selfish moment, column moment. You're going, mine, precious. Gather it all inside. Then when you expand out in all directions. And you gather back from all directions. So you get the whole body involved. So you see what that is for you today. And you find the level that makes sense. So that when you expand out, you feel as if you're expanding out through the top of the head, the feet and the hands. And when you're gathering back in, you're gathering back in from all directions, from above, from below, from around. So that's the physical movement. And it can be quite a small movement that we use as long as everything is moving. As long as all that opening we did in the first section, we're exploiting all of it. So here, we're connecting out through the feet and the top of the head. And here we're gathering back from all directions. But what's special about La Qi is the mind work that we do with that. So the mind work here, in simple terms, we can work with expand out into blue sky, out into Hunyuan Qi. And in Hunyuan Qi, there is no physicality. There is just blue sky. And then when we draw that blue sky back into the body, it's refreshing and it's cleansing. So the expanding out into blue sky and drawing blue sky back in is a very simple image that just gives us a bit of space and allows us to relax and soften, creating space to change. So we'll do this for a few minutes, and I'll lead it simply with sound. And the sound, the opening is Kai, and the gather back is If you find you're running at a different speed, don't worry. Into blue sky. Blue sky back inside. Few more times. And so keeping the movement going gently for yourself. So we can adapt the movement in a number of ways. We can adapt the idea in a number of ways. So we can bring it into different parts of the body, for example. If we allow the hands to draw in towards middle dantian or to the center of the chest and expand out from here, we can bring the emphasis into different ideas. So maybe this is working with whatever you relate the center of the chest to be. Maybe it brings more focus into the lungs. Similarly, you can bring the focus just up into the neck. Try La Qi in the neck. And here we can have just the idea of relaxing, opening, creating space, and bringing blue sky back inside. So here from the neck, we can expand that into the shoulders and open the shoulders. Relax. Draw blue sky back inside. So we can adapt it to anywhere that you want to take this idea. But we can also take this into a walking practice. So if you looked at it as a very traditional style of Qigong, we talk about walking form as being, I'm going to take a step back here, so I've got some space to move. So we tend to shift the weight into one leg, and we talk about an empty step, and the foot is placed. We shift the weight into that foot, then we open, step into the other foot. So this is one way to look at it, but to be honest, just walking, it doesn't have to match up at all. Moving around with this practice is a very appropriate way to. So if you're lucky enough to have an outdoor space, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, for quite a while my morning practice was go and walk around the garden and do La Chi. And you get caught in certain places, sort of in certain views, or maybe just with the sun on your back, just going, I'll practice here for a moment. And then go and wander somewhere else. So you can adapt the practice with the walking. And as long as the mind stays centered, the practice is still good. But if you wanted to look at the way that we would walk within Qigong, then the simple idea is that the empty step means that when the foot is placed, the body stays centered. So I can shift the weight completely into one leg and completely into the other. If I step too far and I fall onto the foot, I can't get the weight onto that leg, and I can't get the weight all the way back here. So we use smaller steps. So a very small step is actually a very healthy way to walk with this. And if single leg is difficult, you can just sort of drag the toe. Just make sure that you keep a connection. But we just come back into wherever you happen to be, wherever you want to be standing. And just this very gentle La Chi. Few more times. Last one. And now in a simple practice, we can allow the closing to simply be the hands relaxing to the sides and gathering back onto the abdomen, but we'll use a more complex closing here, which can be helpful as well. So the more complex closing, the hands draw together in Hersha hands in prayer position. They rise up above the head, continue up into the blue sky. Then they open forwards and the hands expand out to the sides. All the way out into a line, and then the palms turn to face up and they move forwards. Mind expanded out in all directions before middle fingers connect back towards Upper Dantian. The space in the head. bright and full of chi, full of blue sky, the space between thoughts. Then the elbows draw down close to the body, the middle fingers connect to Da Bao, so they're connecting into the middle of the chest, into middle dantian. And here we bring focus into the idea that all functions are normal. Everything is healthy. Qi is abundant. In this moment, everything is healthy. And then the fingers push back into the space behind and expand out and unwind all the way out into Hunyuan Qi, and then we draw Qi back. And one hand rests on the other and rests on the navel. And the mind rests in lower dantian. Lower dantian Qi is abundant. And the mind is quiet. The whole body relaxed. And we release the hands. Ease back into movement, ease back into the space. And we finish with a joyful exclamation in Mandarin. And the joyful exclamation is how is good, and la is already. So we raise the hands, and on a count of 2, 1, 2. How la. Oh, one more. How la. Dog likes howlers. Thank you. Please feel free to chat and to stay and ask questions if you would like, or feel free to go on.
Thank you, John, very much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next week. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very relaxing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if I want to put energy into my feet and ankles, what would I do?
There's a couple of ways that you can do it that I would suggest. If you've got good balance and you're very flexible, then you can actually bend down and put the hands onto the feet or the ankles. But realistically, it tends to be better if you can make contact with an area. So hang on a sec, if I change my camera slightly here and come back so you can see what I'm doing. So simply making physical contact with parts of the body will help to direct the Qi, will help to direct the energy. So if you wanted to work on a shoulder, you can just put a hand on the shoulder. If you want to work with your feet and ankles, then if you can find a way to actually make contact with the feet or the ankles, this can be a very good
Can I be sitting or do I need to be standing?
Sitting is good. Sitting is fine.
Okay.
So that's one option, is you can make contact, and you can also do La Qi on them. So, for example, you could take, I'll do 1 foot at a time, but just the idea of La Qi on the foot and the ankle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that is not possible, you haven't got to make contact with them either. So there was, I remember, it's a guy I'm working with one-to-one at the moment. He's had a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis for almost 60 years. And he struggles with mobility. We were having this conversation about how can he get his ankles working? How can he stop them seizing up quite as much as they are? And I was saying, well, in the mornings when you wake up, do you move your feet at all before you get out of bed? And he was like, well, I've tried it and it seems to work. I said, well, make it a Qigong practice. So literally just being able to turn the foot, smooth circles as opposed to the weird squares I seem to be doing at the moment. But a movement that means that you're bringing awareness into that part of the body is a really good way of doing it.
Okay.
And so really what we're doing is we're just using movement or contact to guide the mind. So does that help?
Yes, a lot.
Brilliant.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. The only thing I would add to that is that it's always good to keep an eye on your intention when you're working with things. If you are working on a particular part of the body, you'll notice that I refer to this thing of all functions are normal. It's a strange word. It's a strange way to express things, but there's an idea here that if you try to make something better, it's bound in time. So the question seems to be, if someone says, I'd like it to be better, then I would tend to ask them, when would it be better? You know, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's next year. And so then the question is, why not better right now? So the intention that you can use with it is, right now, everything here is working normally. Yeah. And that means that you're not binding things in time. You're not doing any other sort of stuff. You're just going, everything here is normal, and I'm just working with it normally. And if you've got a particular part of the body that you're working with, you can even, there was a guy a number of years ago who came to me. He'd tripped over his dog and broken his hip. And he'd been to the hospital, and he called me to apologise for not coming to me first, which I'd have been horrified if his wife had brought him here with a broken hip. That wouldn't have been a good moment. But he said, the doctors have said that if I can get the blood flow back in the bones, if I can get all the capillaries working, I won't have to have a hip replacement. What can I do? Yeah. And so I sat with him and just got a feeling for what was important to him. And he had an iPad. And he spent a lot of time on his iPad. So I said to him, can you get a photo up that shows what you'd like the capillaries in the, or the best representation of the capillaries in the bones working well? And he got this image up, and I said, right, what I want you to do is save that image. And then when you're working on your hip, just use this large Qi piece, but use that image as this is what's going on in my bones. I'm getting all of the capillaries working normally. Everything is fine. And he did that, and I think it was just under 2 weeks later, he called me and he said, I've been up to the hospital. They can't believe how well everything's healed. They can't believe all of the you know, everything is where it should be.
That's great.
So, you know, using images on ads, all of this stuff, put it into the pot. Whatever makes sense to you, work with it as everything is normal, everything works well. So, yeah.
Well, hopefully in 2 weeks I'll have, or even sooner.
I'll see you skipping around the room.
Exactly.
Why not?
Jumping jacks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
And you. Take care, Doreen. Take care.
I will see you next week.
And you. Okay. Then number 2. So I'm not sure if you're still tuned in on this at the moment, Tom, but if you have any questions or you'd like to sort of make any comments, please do.
Yeah, this is my first time tuning in. I found it increasingly difficult because I've got stenosis of my lower spine.
Right, okay.
So it aches terribly unless I'm sitting down in a chair. So to stand up and try the exercise, I found difficult.
Okay, can I give you a little bit of a sort of guidance on that one, or make a suggestion on it? I've got a couple of stools in here, and I'm just going to grab a stool, and so you can see what I'm doing. Because most of these practices can also be done seated. So the first one that we used, where we were turning the thumbs, as long as you've got a chair that you can move the hands around, you can do it seated. When we're doing the bending the body, this can be a seated practice. Everything, you should be able to adapt everything to try it seated. So hopefully, I say, if you want to come along next week, if you can find a chair that is suitable for you to sit on so that you're better supported than the standing posture, and then you've got the option to stand and sit and play with the practices as you go. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I'll try anything. But I've had an operation on it once, some 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was proved successful at the time. Over the last 2 years, it's gradually got worse and back to where it was.
Right, yeah.
And when what's going on in the world at the moment, I don't want to go back to the hospital for another operation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really restricting everything I can do in life.
Yeah, yeah. It's there's a lady who I'm working with quite regularly at the moment who can only stand up for about 30 seconds at a time. It's not the same diagnosis. She has hypermobility and a number of associated issues with that. And she finds great benefit in adapting the practice. But I also like the idea that when we're doing these movements, it's about creating a little bit of space, because quite often when you've got pain, it's like the space is closed up.
Yeah.
And if you can just find a way to open a little bit of space, so adapt the movement to work for you, you'll find that you can get a lot of pain relief in those moments. So yeah, I've worked with fibromyalgia groups for a number of times, well, a fair bit over the years. And quite often when someone has fibromyalgia or they have a diagnosis that relates to persistent pain, they can find a way within a Qigong practice to be pain-free. And then sometimes you'll find that pain-free thing that's going on with the practice, they can take that into everyday life, and they can actually have longer periods where they're completely pain-free. Right. So yeah, it's worth having a play.
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay. And yeah, if you have any questions, please. If you address them PCS UK, then yeah, then they can forward them on to me.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tom. Take care.